Hello everybody, welcome to the Saroy channel. You're really going to like the story tonight. It actually happens in one of the most haunted forests in the entire world, and it's actually in North America, and it's in Maryland of all places. It's known as the Pocomoke State Forest, and it's supposed to be exceedingly haunted. It's also known as the Bermuda Triangle of Maryland because there are so many accounts of people disappearing there. There are orbs of light seen there, and there are sounds of babies crying and people screaming, especially women's voices. So there are all kinds of accounts of this forest, and we have a story from a listener today, which I think you're really going to enjoy. It's a Bigfoot encounter. So let's get started. But before we do, I'd love to remind you to subscribe to my channel, because I have got the most phenomenal stories for you to listen to. And who doesn't love a good story? I say that over and over again, but I really mean it. Nothing beats a good story. So let's get started, and I know you're going to enjoy it. Dear Sarah and all your listeners, my Bigfoot encounter happened in Pocomoke State Forest in Maryland, which is situated close to the small town of Snow Hill and Pokemon City. It is considered to be one of the 10 most haunted forests in the entire world. For over 200 years, there are reports of women screaming and babies crying, as well as sightings of strange balls of fire and balls of light. It is also a place where many people have said to have been vanished without a trace and never been found again. My grandmother always called this forest the Bermuda Triangle of Maryland. I was always warned as a young girl growing up, never ever, under any circumstances, to ever go and visit this forest. I was told there were strange things going on in there that were beyond human comprehension and beyond our understanding of reality. It was believed by many in the early 50s that this forest was an open portal or a lift between our reality and other dimensions. The portal was described as a Venus flytrap that flung open its ravenous mouth when it desired to kidnap humans and transport them to other realities or dimensions. My grandmother told me that 3 sisters ventured into the forest one day in the early 50s to go exploring, and the forest suddenly became deathly quiet. There were no birds singing and no animal sounds, and the only sound they could hear was the sound of their feet crushing the golden oak leaves under their feet. The youngest girl, Matilda, begged her sisters to please go home because she did not feel good, and she had an airy feeling about this horrible forest. However, the other 2 sisters ignored her and were extremely obstinate and insisted on exploring the forest further. Suddenly the whole forest changed as the golden leaf litter blew violently around them like a giant tornado. Then they felt this incredible suction, tunneling sound, and they said it felt like they were being sucked through a long, long dark tunnel or vortex that whirled around like the drum of a washing machine on a strong cycle, but with zero gravity. Suddenly these massive arms reached into the anti-gravity vortex, and the spinning motion suddenly stopped like a washing machine that finally finishes its cycle. 2 of the sisters were prized out of this vortex by the hugest hands, of which one finger was the same size as a 6-foot human being. The 2 sisters looked like 2 tiny dolls in the hand of this gargantuan giant, and they were screaming in terror. The machine started to whirl again on full throttle, and the remaining sister found herself being spat out of the vortex like an unwanted parasite, landing on the golden forest floor. She fled home as fast as her legs could carry her. Naturally, nobody believes the girl's story. Naturally, nobody ever believed the girl's story, but then, over the years, again and again, similar stories were reported. People would describe being caught up in spinning vortexes and encountering different realms and realities. It appeared that this dimensional vortex picked out its prey and spat out the unwanted victims back into our reality. Once my grandmother told me these stories, which I hasten to say I did not believe for a moment. I was very eager to visit this forest for myself, and I decided to go camping there with 2 friends over a weekend, unbeknown to my grandmother, because if she had known, she would have persuaded me against it. I took 2 friends with me, Tabitha and Gabby, and we set up camp in the forest and wasted absolutely no time in exploring. My friends and I were passionate about ghost stories and all things scary and creepy, so we really wanted to see something spooking in the forest, but we were to be sadly disappointed. Even though we do not really believe in ghosts or the supernatural, we were hoping to be proved wrong. The prospect of seeing a ghost or an orb of bright light thrilled us, but we were realistic about the fact that was highly unlikely to happen to us. Although we had a wonderful time by a campfire, telling all kinds of ghost stories and roasting marshmallows, everything was very quiet. We went to sleep and had a very uneventful night, and my friends gave me such a hard time about the fact that there was nothing very special about this forest, and it definitely was not haunted. However, the following night, things were very different. We retired to our tents and fell fast asleep. We were awoken to the slapping sound of someone hitting our tent very hard. We could see the indentations of a large hand pushing the tent canvas inwards. I want to tell you that we were all so freaked out, and suddenly being afraid was not fun at all. I unzipped the tent and peered outside, but there was nothing there. "It's all right," I called. "Coast is clear. No one's here." But someone was, Tabitha insisted, placing an oil lamp outside the tent to light up the whole area around us, and she looked around cautiously. Then she said, "Something big was thumping on our tent, and it sounded dangerous, and it was walking on 2 feet. I heard it clearly." Suddenly we smelled this disgusting odor that was outside our tent, and it was revolting. I found myself hurling. I rushed over a bush to throw up, and as I violently offloaded the contents of my stomach, I suddenly felt a very strong, ominous presence that was the source of the vile smell standing beside me. I glanced up, and standing there behind the bush was a monstrous ape, humanoid-like creature with dark brown, long, straggly hair and the brightest red eyeshine. I regarded this vile beast in total horror and disbelief. This hairy being curled back his lips and snarled at me. The look he gave me was savage, brutal, and fierce, and I knew I was facing a predator that could ultimately kill me with one strike of his enormous humanoid hands. I could even see steam coming out of a very large flat nose that almost looked like a dragon. In certain light, this hairy beast almost appeared ghost-like, with the way the light from the oil lamp made parts of his mop-like hair appear translucent. But believe me, he was real and larger than life. What's more, he was exceedingly dangerous, and he did not want us on his turf. I noticed the creature was about 7 feet tall, with huge shoulders and a chest. It had a triangular-like head that curled at the top, creating a dome effect. Suddenly the creature let out the most terrifying scream that sounded like a woman being savagely killed. We heard other screams coming from further away in the forest, and we realized that there were more of these creatures, and they were all pursuing us. It suddenly felt like trains were running through the forest on high speed. It was terrifying. "Run!" I screamed to my friends as I saw a large stone being hurled at us by the enraged creature. All 3 of us ran as fast as we could without daring to look back. We jumped into Gabby's car, turned on the ignition, and accelerated as fast as we could away from this nasty, horrible forest. Beads of sweat were pouring down my face as we drove. My heart was pounding violently in my chest like a heavy drum. And as for my two friends, they barely said a thing, but they were shaking so violently from traumatizing fear. "What the heck was that?" cried Tabitha. "That hairy thing! What was it? What in the world was it? What was that horrible, horrible thing?" "It was hideously ugly," cried Gabby. "It was going to kill us. I know it was going to kill us. I felt it was going to kill us." We drove to my grandmother's house in Maryland and told her what had happened. "We left our camping gear behind," said Gabby, "and we're never, ever going back to get it." My grandmother looked at us and she said, "There'll be no point anyway. They will have probably all ripped it up by now. I imagine it's hanging all over the forest floor." "Did I not tell you," she said to me, scolding me, "never, ever go into that forest? Did I not warn you about how dangerous it is? Did I not tell you about the portal in that place? That it could literally take you to another dimension and you'd never be seen again?" "You did," I said, "but Gran, your story sounded like total baloney, if you forgive me for saying." "Oh, really?" said my grandmother sarcastically. "Am I not a lot older than you? Am I not a lot wiser than you? Have I not seen more in my life than you have seen in your sad little 20 years? It seems like you encountered a Bigfoot, and you, mark my words, you got off lightly. Things could have been a whole lot worse for you. And you might not even be here now to tell me this story." So there you are. That was my Bigfoot encounter. And this was the first time I even heard of Sasquatch or the hairy man. And believe me, it will be too soon if I ever encounter this monstrous beast-like creature ever again. Until next time, good night and goodbye, and don't forget to subscribe. Good night.